You know the guy to the side of me, Eddie Garcia. He is on Twitter at Eddie on Fox. He is Ben Maller's sidekick, Fox
Mm.
Sports Radio anchor. Eddie has his own website, his own podcast, puckpodcast.com. Go check that out. I am a fill-in anchor at Fox Sports Radio. I'm Bryan Fenley. Eddie, it is an honor to have you. And I go back to what Clay Travis says about how long you've been at Fox Sports Radio, where he associates it as you were part of storming the beaches of Normandy. That's how
Yeah.
long it dates back since you started. Take us back to that day, or how the floodgates opened for you and how you got to FSR right when the network was starting.
It wasn't quite right when the network started, but it was close. October 29th this year will be my 19th year at Fox Sports Radio, which is shocking, stunning. I can't believe it. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, and yet it does in some ways. I mean, when I look back on it, but do you want me to go back to like where it all started?
Yeah, take us back.
All right. So, I went to Fresno State, which is a small college, in Central California. I'm wearing my Fresno State baseball cap right now. Shout out to the Bulldogs. I'm from Central California. For people that don't know, it's very rural. It's farming community. The whole central part of the state of California is all farming. It's the most, I believe it's the largest agricultural area in the world. People think California, they think LA, San Francisco, but the central part of California is very much like the Midwest of the country. So that's where I grew up. Went to Fresno State, which was the college that was in that area. Did all the TV radio stuff. Was a sports director at the campus radio station. So I knew growing up I had a passion for sports, and I wanted to do something in sports, and I didn't really know what. But once I got to college and got really involved with the campus radio station, I knew I wanted to do something in radio, TV, something like that. So I graduated from college. I immediately get a couple of jobs locally. There were some all sports stations there. I was a morning host, doing the reports and, like board opping the national shows, ESPN, and then back in the day, One-on-One Sports Network, if you remember that. And so I had 3 radio jobs in 3 years, and I quickly learned it's not very stable. My first job, I got fired. My second job, I got hired by another station. So I kind of went fired, found another job, and then got promoted.
Okay.
But then that station, radio, I found out local radio is pretty volatile. That station was sold and immediately was turned into a Spanish language station. And so like 30 employees, we come into work on a Friday. Of course, it's always on a Friday, right?
Of course.
And we all get blown out. We're all gone. And it was funny because we all immediately went to the bar. the whole group, going to the bar and figuring out what we're going to do next. So 2 college roommates at Fresno State were from Orange County. Okay. When I graduated, I looked for a job locally. When they graduated, they went back home.
Okay.
So they ended up getting hired and being editors for Fox Sports Network television. They were cutting highlights for the nightly highlight shows. And so I call them up. I'm like, man, I've had 3 jobs in 3 years. Radio is so unstable. Is there anything going on down there for me? Maybe. And they're like, yeah, come down. We'll connect you with the right people. And I got an entry-level job working for the Fox Sports Network. And at the time, they had a version of Sports Center. It was called the National Sports Report. And so I was a researcher. I worked with guys like Chris Myers and Keith Olbermann.
Oh, wow.
And Chris Rose, who was actually really instrumental in getting my job at Fox Sports Radio.
Wow.
And so that was pretty cool. And there were other people there that you just make connections with. And so I did that like for 3 or 4 years. And then Fox Sports Radio started, and they had the brilliant idea at Fox, we'll just put all the TV people on the radio and kind of promote our TV stuff with these TV people on radio, because it's radio, they can do it. It's not hard,
it's
right?
Yeah.
Well, there were two issues with that. Number one, they didn't want to do it. They really didn't want to do it. People like Chris Rose and Chris Myers and Jeannie Zelasco, and they just shoved them all on radio and said, do a radio show. And they quickly realized this isn't really working because it's different. Radio is different than TV. It's not. So then they started to transition into actually getting radio people to be on the radio. Chris Myers did hang around for actually a long time and did both. But anyway, so that was starting up, and Chris Rose, who does MLB Network and NFL Network,
Sure.
I knew him, and I knew he was doing both, and he seemed to be enjoying it. And I said, I have a radio background. I'd like to get back into radio. Can you kind of point me in the right direction?
Mm-hmm.
He said, absolutely. Contacted me with the right person. I interviewed for it. They hired me to be kind of what you're doing now, Brian, which is a jack of all trades,
just
right?
Whenever they plug and place. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I was weekends, holidays, fill in for anybody that was off, fill in for anybody that was sick. And I did that part-time for probably 5 years. And it got to a point where I was like, all right, there was a guy named Jerome Jurinovich. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I've heard of the name. Yeah.
Yeah. Jerome Jurinovich was his little catchphrase every time he came on the air. So he left to go do TV in Atlanta. I think he still does Hawks and Braves, maybe like pre and post game show for Fox down there. Anyway, so he left and there was an opening, and I'm like, all right, this is either I get this or I'm leaving, because I'm the next in line. And so thankfully they said, yes, you've paid your dues. You're up next. We're going to make you full time. And so I've been there ever since. So.
Wow. Eddie Garcia is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. And then how about the role that Chris Rose played for you? And how did he help? You talked about this a little bit, but facilitate you in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, Chris is a super nice guy. He was pretty young at the time too. Now that I look back on it, he was probably in his mid-20s, and he was just a nice guy. And I just asked him, hey, can you help me out with this? And he was, look, you probably know this already, I'm sure, Brian, but for people who want to get into business and everything, look, what college you go to is great. What experience you have is great. And I learned this late, and I wasn't really big on it at the time. It is about who you know.
Sure.
It's about relationships with people. And I know I really pushed against that early on in my career because I didn't want to be fake. I didn't want to have relationships with people just for what they could do for me. Yeah. And so, people talked about, and they told me early on, like networking and make contacts and all this stuff. And I just wasn't into that at all. And I eventually got smart enough to realize just because you're making contacts doesn't mean you have to be fake or phony. You can still be genuine. You could still not feel like you're using people to further yourself. So that was the thing with Chris. I mean, I had a nice relationship with him. We were friendly. I wasn't like using him for anything. I just knew he had a connection. And so bottom line is, you need to make those connections to get places, right? Yeah. My friends from college helped me get my job at Fox Sports Net. Chris Rose helped me get my job at Fox Sports Radio. But once you get those opportunities, then it's on you to either prove you belong or not.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, like I said, Chris was just a really nice guy. Every once in a while I bump into him, not too often, but every once in a while, and I always say thank you. And he's always like, all I did was give your name to someone. It wasn't like, you know what I mean? But still, I do appreciate that.
You took it and you ran with it. And what I found interesting about this whole thing is there are relationships that take time, but some people I think not or part of it is the people that use people, they don't really get to know that person. And so the difference is, Eddie, you knew these people, you built these relationships over time. And it wasn't like, hey, I'm blindly reaching out. Okay, now get me this. It's like you knew the people. And so you had a level of trust and stability in their relationship with you. And I think that is what really is important about it, and that it doesn't look fake because you build a relationship over time. It's not instant gratification or instant success right away, but hopefully, you can help each other out moving forward. How did you then first meet Ben Maller?
Ben was an update anchor, just like me and you. He was a guy that, how it is, two ships passing in the night. I see you at night, and I come in and take over for you, and we, have a little chit chat. But yeah, Ben was an update anchor, and I followed him, or he came after me a lot. And it was pretty wild in the early years of Fox Sports Radio because we didn't have an editing department. We had one guy who edited. His name is Chris Lindsley. He still works at Fox Sports Radio. I call him the Phantom of the Opera because every once in a while I'll see him sneaking out at night because he's like now Vito Violante's right-hand man. But
Okay.
he works in the evening at night and helps out with the imaging and everything. And he doesn't, he's a really nice guy. I like him, but he's one of those guys where he's not going to come in the studio and say, "Hey, how you doing? I haven't talked to you in a
Yeah.
while." But I'll go to the bathroom or something, or I'll go to the
Yeah.
kitchen to get something, and I'll see him sneaking out. And I'll be like, "Chris, I haven't seen you in like 5 years, even though you're here every night." But no, we had to, as update anchors, we had to edit games and get audio. And I tell you what, when you were working during games, we had like 3 computers running, and Chris would be in that back in the update studio cutting up sound, and he'd be like, "Oh, somebody just hit a home run. I'm putting it in right now." And the shifts went by so fast because you were constantly doing something.
Yeah.
And it was crazy, but it was great experience. I think I'm a great audio editor because of that,
Wow. Yeah.
So it was fun. But Ben was doing updates just like me, and then doing some part-time hosting as well. And
Yeah.
eventually he got away from the updates and started hosting. And then now, of course, he and I have been reunited now for a few years, doing the Ben Maller show and just having a ton of fun every night.
You guys, the whole crew, it's like a good for radio dysfunctional family. Like, it's very entertaining. And you've got Coop, and then you've got Roberto, yourself, and Ben. For Coop, I remember when you had him do that one update. What was it? How did that all come about? Because that was some really riveting radio.
It's funny because I think it happened because, okay, with COVID, all of our hosts are doing their shows from home studios.
Sure.
So Ben's at home, and so every once in a while the equipment will drop out, and so I'll have to jump in and fill in for him. And I think that's what happened. And I said, "Well, I'm hosting, so Coop, you got to do the update." And so he came in, and I gave him my script. And what people don't know is I ad-lib like 50% of the stuff I say on the radio.
Sure.
I just put a score and a couple of notes, and then I just talk. And he didn't know that. So he looks at this script. He thinks like everything I say is going to be written out. He's just going to read it. And it's just a score and like 2 notes. And he's like, "Well, what is this?" And so it was funny. He tried to do it, and it was, comedy ensued. But the other day it happened where Ben, his equipment totally failed on him. He had to drive into the studio, which is like 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
So he's like, "Eddie, just take over." I'm not prepared at all. And so I just took over, and we took some calls, and I did one of the games that Ben does. And
Yeah.
it actually was pretty good. I was actually a little bit surprised, but I told Roberto, I said, "Roberto, come in and do the update since I'm hosting." And he said, "Okay." And then he chickened out at the last second. I would have loved to have heard Roberto.
Oh my God.
That would have been amazing radio, but he kind of chickened out on that, which is surprising because he's sung songs on the radio. He's kind of, been not afraid to try some different things, but he didn't want to touch that one.
Oh my goodness. He also has Cooking with Roberto. Have you ever tried any of his recipes?
I have not.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I've tried them as far as eating them, because sometimes he'll cook them and he'll bring them in for us.
Oh, we'll bring him in, yeah.
But it's actually like following his recipe and doing it, I have not done that. Although he had some kind of a cilantro sauce he made the other day, and he said it was really easy. And I've told my wife, I'm like, "Hey, we got to try this. This looks really good." And so I think my wife's gonna probably whip something up there, a little cilantro sauce for whatever. But no, it's funny. We kind of tried a few different things with Roberto. We had the dating with Roberto. That was a disaster. Especially because he's already married with the kids. He's not dating anymore. It's not like, because he took over for Danny G, who's now producing Clay Travis.
That's
and
right.
Danny is a single guy, and he has, every time I see him at an event, he's got a different girl with him. So he literally is, right? He's out there dating and doing all this stuff. And that was his wheelhouse. So dating with Roberto was a disaster. We tried weather with Roberto.
That's right.
It was funny, but it wasn't so good either. He's finally found his niche because he likes cooking. It's that's what you got to do. You got to find something you're kind of passionate about and something you're interested in. And so it's become a hit now. So I've told him, no more dating, no more weather. You found your niche. It's now it's cooking with Roberto. So yeah, hopefully that'll stick.
Well, speaking of dating, you are a happily married man. And how did you meet your wife? Karen obviously is a very fervent believer in the Chargers, supports them a whole lot. The first night you met her, I heard there was a story.
There is, and it is funny. Some people were like, "Oh, you married a Fox Sports Radio groupie? Is that right?" And I guess you could look at it that way. But Karen loves sports. She loves sports talk radio, and she listened to a show that I was on. She listened to a bunch of shows, but she listened to one of the shows I was on. I did a weekend show with a guy, Bruce Jacobs, who's now doing sports talk radio in Arizona. And she loved that show. She listened and she called in, and she's like disappointed I don't really remember her calling in. I kind of remember her calling in. But she also listened to Ben's weekend show a lot.
Okay.
And Ben was doing a show. The update anchor was a woman named Karen Kay. Karen is a huge Chargers fan. Karen Kay is a huge Chargers fan. She's a huge Angels fan. My wife obviously is a huge Chargers fan, Angels fan. They're both named Karen. And so they kind of struck up a relationship. And she would call in to Ben's show and whatnot. And so Karen Kay had a birthday party in Newport Beach, and we were all invited. And my wife, Karen, got invited.
Okay.
And so she reached out to me, maybe it was like on Facebook or something, I don't even remember, and said, "Hey, I'm going to be at this party. It'd be cool to meet you." And I'm like, "Okay." And so, yeah, I met her, and we kind of hit it off. You know, I'm not going to say it was love at first sight or anything, but I was like, "Oh, she's really cool." And I'm single and she's single and so on. And so I just thought maybe she'd be cool to hang out with and whatnot. So, but luckily she left fairly early. She stayed a few hours and then she left. And after she left, there was a lot of celebrating going on, and I overdid it. And I ended up feeding the fish in the Newport Harbor there. So if she was around to see that, she probably would have thought this guy is not for me. But luckily, she didn't see that, or maybe she heard about it after the fact. But anyway,
yeah.
So then after that, we started dating, and I knew I had to find a woman who was into sports because it's such a huge part of my life. And so, yeah, she is as big a football fan as I am. I mean, sincerely, and I'm a huge football fan. And I ended up proposing to her at a Chargers game.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a Monday night game, Christmas Eve against the Broncos. My wife loves Christmas, loves the Chargers, and I guess hopefully loves me. So I figured it was the perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 99% sure she was going to say yes, but I thought this is the perfect time to do it. So right at kickoff, with Ozzy Osbourne, what was the song they play at the kickoff all the time? Like Crazy Train, maybe, or something.
Yeah, something like that.
They're getting ready for kickoff, and I pulled the ring out of my pocket, and so the rest is history.
So did you do it like when the game was in action, or did you do it right beforehand?
Right as they were lining up for the kickoff. So, and these people around us are like, "Man, this lady is really excited about the start of this game." Yeah.
So you had a tinge of, 99% chance you thought it was going to go well. Did you have any doubts creeping in at the last moment there?
No, I didn't. The only thing I was concerned about was I had this ring in my pocket the whole time, and I was terrified I was going to lose it because I'm the type of person that would lose, something like that.
Yeah.
So I literally had my hand in my pocket the entire day holding on to it. And after the fact, she was like, "I was wondering, why was your hand in your pocket like the entire day?" So I was actually more relieved that I could finally get it out of my pocket and put it on her finger and not have to worry about losing it anymore.
What's your favorite Ben Maller blooper over the years?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I just love when he gets angry, basically, when he kind of loses it. We had one
When
of
do
those
you remember him
moments just
getting
the other day.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the monologue or the series of monologues on the Clippers, like, was that the angriest you've ever seen him?
It was pretty close, although I think in the back of my mind, how could he be shocked by this, right? He's a Clippers fan, and he has to know this is the life of a Clippers fan, much like a Cleveland Browns fan knows this is the life of, you know what I mean? There's just certain teams that it seems like, there's some curse on them or something. So he actually took the Clippers loss the other day to the Nuggets pretty well. He knew he was going to get it, and knew he was going to have to take it. And to his credit, he took it. But there was a moment we played a soundbite from Doc Rivers, and he was so angry at what Doc Rivers had to say. He said, "I want to curse so bad right now." And Roberto, our tech director, is like, "Do it, I'll dump you. Do it, I'll dump you." And he's like, "Really? Should I do it?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll dump you." And to his credit, he trusted Roberto. He would
Good
dump
for
him.
Roberto. Good for wow.
And he said, "Can I say what he said on here?" I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He's like, "This is so much bullshit," and we just died laughing. And I think Coop left it in the podcast. I'm not sure, but that was pretty funny. And Roberto did dump him, and so he's still not going to get fired or anything.
I was listening to that portion, and because I think that was like the first hour, right, or right at the beginning.
I think it was the second hour.
That's right. It was the second hour, and I was like, huh. Did Ben read a tweet and he thought it was said a certain way, and then he read something he didn't think, and then that makes sense that was what actually happened. How about a moment, Eddie, when you delivered some humility to Ben?
Well, there have been a few times. I mean, the thing is, Ben never admits he's wrong, right? That's one of the things about him that infuriates people, and me too. But probably the Antonio Brown thing, me being a Steelers fan. When the Antonio Brown thing happened, he was like, the Steelers are idiots to get rid of this guy. They're going to regret this. They're going to be worse off without him. He's a great player. You put up with, when you have great players like this, you got to put up with them being divas and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm not letting him get away with this. And I'm like, look, I know what I'm talking about. Yes, he's talented, but you can't blow off. What the Steelers and a lot of teams will put up with stuff until you start blowing off meetings or walkthroughs, and then, on top of all the other stuff that's going on. So I'm like, they were absolutely right to get rid of him. They're better off without him. I never said Antonio Brown, his career is going to go down the drain. Like it kind of has, right? But I remember telling Ben, "You're 100% wrong. You know what you're talking about." So then as the Antonio Brown saga was starting to play out, of course I brought it up to Ben. And I'm like, "See, I told you I was right." And then, of course, his famous thing is, and it's infuriating, "Well, I was right at the time." What does that mean? You weren't right at the time. It's just, that's Ben. He always finds a way to wiggle himself out of even when he's completely 100% wrong. And I've always told him, you would make a great politician, Ben. You would be
He always brings up the weasel words, like he doesn't use them, but I feel like he's the one that is an expert on them in a way. Have you ever had him pull a prank on you on the air?
No, but we have one of our funnier things is the out of context audio. And so we all immediately know it. And sometimes I'll say something and I'll immediately go like, "Oh God, there's a drop."
Yeah.
As soon as it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, "No, I want to bring it back." But we do that all the time to each other. We'll say something and then out of context, it sounds incredibly dirty. For example, we were talking about movies, and I can't remember what the context was. Maybe it was like great Robert Downey Jr. movies or something weird. Maybe not Robert Downey Jr., Brad Pitt or something. And I said, "Oh, Snatch was good." The movie, the movie Snatch, which was very good, Guy Ritchie movie. And as soon as I said it, I was like, "Oh God." And of course they play that often, but and we'll all point out to each other. I'm like, "Roberto, that's a drop. That's a drop." And Ben will be like, "No, I didn't, no." So those are always fun.
One of the things I think Ben's going to pay for is he was anti Kyler Murray, and the way, and I think like you said about the Steelers, I think Ben is going to start to eat his words with Kyler Murray. The better he gets, and Ben is going to have to come to the realization that he was kind of wrong, maybe.
But he'll just say I was right at the time.
Yeah. What is the percentage of the time Ben cheats on a game?
Well, it's hard to say because, as you know, the setup of our studios, and of course he's not even there now, but
sure.
He's in one room, I'm in another. People probably don't realize this weird setup that they have. It's like an L where, I'm looking at the producer and the tech producer, and he is too, but we're from opposite ends. We can't see each other. So it's a little odd, but Jonas Knox, I don't know why he denies this now, but Jonas Knox caught Ben on thesaurus.com when we were playing Password, which is just the most blatant cheating. I mean, he's looking up words to give clues. He's not coming with it out of his head. So I think the percentage is probably pretty high. So on Password, I'm going to say it's probably 90%. Some of the other games it might be a little bit harder, but he of course, Ben, like you said, weasel words, he calls it gamesmanship. He doesn't call it cheating. So it's probably pretty high because he doesn't like to lose. Well, none of us do, but
What do you think of all the nicknames he has for you?
I think they're pretty funny.
All of them?
Yeah, and they all come from a funny place. And that's one of the great things about the Ben Maller show is no one just, very rarely do people call in and say, oh, it's Brian from, LA. They've always got some nickname. We've got beer drinking Brian.
Yeah.
Girlfriend Half Pint, which are the latest human cartoon characters to join the show. But it's crazy, all these different nicknames. But for me, they all come from a story. So it's like, let's see if I can remember. It's Edmund, Dallas, Lady Bing, Judas, Jar Jar, Gated,
Steamboat,
Willie. I mean, it goes on and on and on, but they're all pretty funny.
The Judas one, how did that happen?
Actually, that's one of the ones I don't like. But,
oh, you don't? Okay.
They, as you know, we have a lot of Lakers fans at Fox Sports Radio, and Ben's a Clippers fan. And so there's always a war going on between the two because he really does hate the Lakers. He's very jealous of them, and who could blame them? So I was, our I don't know how it is on other shows, but our battles, our jokes go on off the air too. And we have, group texts, right? Yeah. And so it was, at the time, it was Danny G, who was our tech producer at the time, and Coop, both Lakers fans, and Ben and me, and they were all going back and forth, Lakers Clippers, in an off-air conversation. And so all I did was I took a screenshot and I said, look, this is even going on while we're not on the air. I thought that was funny. And then he was like, oh, you violated the bubble of trust. That was not meant for people to see. It was nothing scandalous about it at all. And so he called me Judas.
He called you Judas. What's a time, because I remember one, it was over an athlete donating money, but doing it in a way where it looked like they were drawing attention to themselves. When Coop and Ben got into it, I think it must have been about a year ago or something like that. But do you ever recall a time, obviously there were times, good for radio, that Coop and Ben just got into it when they were going back and forth over something?
It's funny. Ben and I used to do that a lot. Not a lot, but we'd really go at it. And he would really drive me crazy. And then it's funny. A few years ago, I was like, what am I doing? Why am I getting wrapped? I mean, maybe it's good radio, but it's not good for my blood pressure. And I just decided, honestly, unless it's something like the Antonio Brown thing where I'm like really knowledgeable about it, I'm not going to argue with him about all this, whatever. But Coop has taken my place on this.
Yes.
Especially with the political stuff that's going on now. Because Coop is very on the left and Ben is very on the right. And so they get into it pretty good when it comes to the national anthem and all that kind of stuff. So that's I think it comes across, it's pretty genuine. And it gets a little heated. But thankfully, once we go to break, I think it's all kind of forgotten for the most part. And then we kind of go on because we know, look, those things will happen occasionally, but really it's about having fun and laughing and having a good time. So it hasn't really carried over too much. I do remember one time Ben really got angry with me and it was over a misunderstanding. Some people take this stuff way too seriously, right? Yeah. So he was going off on the city of Cleveland when the LeBron stuff was all going on. And some people in Cleveland went over the line with Ben and had really, some people had like physically threatened him and crazy stuff, right? So he was going off on Cleveland. And I, just to be a contrarian, was kind of defending Cleveland. And I didn't know about the stuff that had happened. And so we went to break and he came in the update studio. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, then he gives me the details. He's like, I've had to contact the police. They threatened me and my wife. And I'm like, dude, I had no idea. I was just trying to, I was just giving you a little back and forth. I didn't know. I apologize, so whatever. So that was like the only time I ever remember him really getting upset with me. And it was just, I didn't know, the details of it. So it ended up being squashed pretty quickly. But usually those arguments, even if they're intense in the moment, thankfully they don't have any real carryover or anything.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, no hard feelings, hopefully. And yeah, it's radio. It's supposed to be entertaining. Having a pushback and having some riff is good, entertaining stuff. The callers, who do you love the most? I know you don't want to select one because there's so many good ones out there, but how about a couple or one that made you laugh the most or are making you laugh the most?
Boy, that's hard. Yeah, there's been so many. I think the thing that amazes me is that, people come and go, especially on the night shift, right? People have these jobs and then they get another job and suddenly they're working in the daytime like most normal people. And there's always someone to take their place. It's insane. And it's funny how some people really believe that we're paying these callers or that they're made up. They're characters. They're not real people.
They're characters. Yeah.
I mean, they are characters, but they're
That's
real
true.
people. They're not,
Yeah.
this is not set up in any way, but I get it because they're so outlandish. Like the beer drinking Brian and Half Pint. Those are human cartoon characters. And part of it is hilarious and part of it is kind of sad because literally they're calling in every night and they're totally schnockered. I mean,
Yeah.
they're drunk every night, and it's like, God, I hope this is not good for their health. But Jeannie in Medford was obviously one of the all-time greats. God rest her soul, and
Yeah.
that was an amazing story with her. How she passed away, and we found out thanks to another listener who kind of found out the details for us that she didn't have the funds to be properly buried, and
Sure.
we decided to throw it out there for the Maller Militia if they wanted to kind of donate and help her be taken care of properly, and they did. They donated a ton of money, and we ended up even not only did we get her cremated and put into Big Lebowski is popping in my head about a modest receptacle, but they gave that to her daughter who she was estranged from, and she appreciated that. And there's a bench now in, I can't remember, is it Echo Park? Somewhere here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I saw a picture of that.
There was a Jeannie in Medford bench because we had extra money left over. And so, the Maller Militia certainly has a heart as well. And, honestly, my wife brings this up a lot. And I've come to realize it is that, we're not in this to like help people's lives out necessarily, but we do become a part of their lives. And especially if you have this routine where you're working nights, you're a security guard, or you're stocking shelves, or you're throwing newspapers or whatever, we kind of become a part of these people's lives and we don't realize it. And I did want to share a story with you that was like one of the most profound things that ever happened working at Fox Sports Radio. A couple of years ago, and working overnights, I don't have a lot to do, frankly. I mean, like if you're working in the day, you're constantly looking for breaking news, news stories. If there's games going on, you're updating the games. But overnights, rarely is there something breaking. It happens occasionally. So I use my time to interact with our listeners. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook a lot. And I respond to their tweets because Ben's doing the show. He doesn't have time to do that. Coop's answering phones. Roberto's pushing his buttons. So I kind of have the time. So I try to do that to help the show. So I got a message a couple of years ago from a guy on Facebook that I had interacted with randomly. And he says, hey, I just want to let you know, I've been listening for years, and I just wanted to thank you guys for all the laughs and all the, the fun times. He's like, I'm in the hospital. He's like, I'm probably going to go home to die in a few days. And I just want to say thanks for and have a great life or something like that. And I just remember looking at this message and I'm like, how do I even respond to this? I just felt it was amazing. And so, I wrote him back and he didn't ever respond. And then, because you're on Facebook and then on someone who passes away, like on their Facebook page, family members and friends start posting stuff about it. And he did pass away. His name was Daryl Statz. He was in Minnesota. And so I brought it up on the air with Ben. We talked about it a little bit, and he was a huge Minnesota Golden Gophers hockey fan. And I happened to have a Minnesota Golden Gophers hockey hat that someone had given me
Wow.
over the years. And so I wore it and I took a picture of it and I sent it to his family saying, I'm wearing this tonight, remembering Daryl, and just wanted you guys to know we're thinking of him. And they just, they responded. They were so grateful. They listened to the show when we talked about him, and just, just you become a part of people's lives. It's not why we're in it. We're in it just to have fun and do something that we enjoy. But it is kind of, every once in a while, I do kind of think, wow, we kind of are like these people's friends.
Yeah.
And we talk to them every night in their living rooms or whatever. And so that's kind of a fun, I don't know, part of what we do. If we can and people have said, hey, we have a guy now, Philly Rob, who's going through cancer treatments, and he's a big fan of the show. And he's come into our studio and visited with us. And then we found out, this terrible news, and he's fighting the good fight, and he's got a great attitude about it. But you actually sometimes have these relationships with people, and if we can help them out through tough times and give them a distraction, especially now, right, with COVID and everything else that's going on in the world, it's cool that we can kind of do that for them.
Well, Eddie, that was exactly where I was going, because whether you know it or not, there are so many people out there that look at what you guys do as medicine, as an escape, as a chance to laugh, when quite frankly, there's not a whole lot to laugh about in this world right now. But that is why, I get to fill in for you from time to time, but I love the show. Like, I'm listening to it when I'm not working. Like, I feel a connection, which all of your listeners do. And that's what separates you guys from others, is there's a pride, but there's also a connection. And there's such a funny hilarity to it that it allows me to take my mind off whatever's going on. And I know that is for the other listeners too. All of the Maller Militia that'll watch and listen to this podcast. That is such an important thing that you guys are doing, whether it's intentional or not. That's the crazy thing about what you guys are doing. And the humor, the phone calls, everything syncs up in such a beautiful way. And you just don't know how many people out there rely on you every night, or rely on Ben every night just to get through their day, to give them some optimism. And it's just a special feeling, it must be, to see the effect that you are having on all of these people and social media and everything. Because if any time we need you guys, the Ben Maller Show, an escape, it is now, and you guys are delivering. So I appreciate you, Eddie, for coming on and opening up about your story, your indoctrination into radio, key anecdotes from your time at Fox Sports Radio, and just the overall bond you have with the team that you work with, but also the militia and the fans that make the show so good and what it is today. And Eddie, I just want to thank you so much for coming on this podcast and taking some time. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I've watched some of the other ones that you've done. Some of the people I've worked with, like Jake Warner, it was interesting.
He was awesome.
Yeah, I didn't get to listen to all of it, and I don't know we're kind of wrapping it up here and everything, but I was thinking about 19 years at Fox Sports Radio, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I was wondering, I wonder if Jake shared that one story, one of the more shocking moments on Fox Sports Radio, and I don't know if he did or not, because I didn't watch all of it, and I was thinking about there have been, like I said, there's been good, bad, and ugly in 19 years there. Every once in a while you see something that's like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. So I don't know if that's a show for another time, but yeah, it's been crazy. It's been awesome. But you work someplace for 19 years, there's bound to be a few crazy things that happen, right? So yeah.
And to 19 and 20 and 21 and 22 years moving forward for you. Eddie, thank you so much. Eddie Garcia with us. I'm Bryan Fenley.